Thank you. Well, it is 6:30, and I would like to call this meeting to order. Planning Commission meeting, June 16th, 2026, at 6:30 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Commissioner Huggins.
Here.
Commissioner DeVoynes. He may end up being online soon. Not here yet. Commissioner Bowman.
Present.
Commissioner Fatizzi.
Present.
Commissioner Jasper. Not here. Commissioner Fournette, here. Commissioner Sexton.
Present.
Here. Okay, thank you. And consent agenda, did everyone have a chance to read the minutes from May 19th? And do we have any comments? Okay. Could I have a motion to approve them as written?
I make a motion to approve.
First by Commissioner Fatizzi, second.
I second.
Commissioner Bowman seconds. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as written for May 19th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Okay. They pass as written. General public comments at 6:32. Please keep comments to 3 minutes or less. Because state law prohibits the use of city facilities for the purpose of supporting or opposing a campaign or ballot proposition, we respectfully request that public comment not make reference to such matters. Written comments will be accepted by letter or via email to nmcgowan@sedro-woolley.gov. Attention public comment until 4:30 p.m. the day before the meeting. Do we have any letters or
No
people?
written comments received by staff.
Oh, okay. Commissioner DeVoynes is online now, so he is present. I assume you're present. Are you there, Matt? Can you hear us?
He is rejoining
Yes.
us now.
Okay.
Yes, I can. I just was promoted to panelist.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I apologize. I had a broken bone in my foot.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I've never done that.
Hope you get well soon.
Thank you.
Where was I? Public comment. So there's no one online, no letters, and no one here. Public comment, general public comments is closed at 6:33. No public hearings tonight. Unfinished business. Updates to Chapter 17.65 Sedro-Woolley Municipal Code, Regulations for Critical Areas, Wetland Guidance. And who would like to kick it off?
Thank you. Tom Glover, Community Development Director. So this is part of our comprehensive plan implementation process to update our critical areas regulations, and in particular the wetland guidance portion. Nicole or Ashton, do you want to add any comments before I turn this over to Alex? No? Okay, good. So tonight we've got Alex from our Facet team here tonight to go through this with us. Take it away, Alex.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you all for the opportunity to re-present some of the topics that we addressed in the last Planning Commission meeting. So we're just going to go over a quick recap of the state requirements for critical area ordinances, discuss some of the wetland buffer options, which hopefully you all have received the technical memorandum that we put together outlining a fourth option that we want to discuss with you this evening. And then we also just wanted to rediscuss the site potential tree height discussion before we put together a public release draft. And then there will be opportunities for discussion. So again, the purpose of the critical areas regulation update is to comply with the Growth Management Act and the state law. You're required to ensure consistency with best available science. And the previous critical areas ordinance update was adopted in 2016, so it is due for a periodic update. You're required to demonstrate no net loss. So counties and cities are required to protect critical areas and must ensure no net loss of ecological functions and values when preparing development regulations. So as a part of what's considered best available science, so jurisdictions must include best available science when developing policies and development regulations, and must also give special consideration to the preservation and protection measures necessary to preserve or enhance anadromous fisheries. And then the state outlines what is considered best available science, and the two documents that we most will be referencing in this presentation is the critical areas model ordinance prepared from Department of Ecology and the Fish and Wildlife Riparian Ecosystem Guidance Volume 1 and 2. So we just also wanted to discuss what it looks like if you depart from best available science. So any county or city departing from science-based recommendations must include in the record identification of information that supports the decision to depart, explain the rationale for departing, and then identify any potential risks to climate resiliency and the functions and values of critical areas. And then you still must also demonstrate that no net loss is being achieved. So we're going to start out with the wetland buffers. So again, we just wanted to go over what the existing wetland buffer framework is like. So currently it's regulated by the different types of categories. So you have category 1, 2, 3, and 4. And those have set buffer widths based on the category. So for category 1, you have 150 feet. Category 2 is 110. Category 3 is 50, and category 4 is 25. So Ecology outlines in their most recent publication 3 different options that jurisdictions can consider. We went over this option in the last Planning Commission meeting that has this table that's based on both the category of wetland and then the habitat score, or if it has special characteristics. You are allowed to use this if you have a habitat corridor and you follow impact minimization measures. And so we talked about some of those impact minimization measures during the last meeting as well. And then if an applicant chooses not to apply the applicable minimization measures or a habitat corridor cannot be maintained, then approximately a 33% increase of the width of all buffers is required. This option 2 is based on both land use impact and wetland categories. So it breaks it down by low, moderate, and high land use intensities. And then there is a table here that outlines what those different activities might look like. And then option 3 is the most consistent with the methodology that the city currently uses, but is the least flexible option, and has a significant increase from the current framework. So what we heard from the Planning Commission in the last meeting was that some of these options may not represent what the city needs to meet the newly developed comprehensive plan goals and policies. So we went back and looked at whether or not there was other ways that we could still comply with best available science and offer additional flexibility. So this is a wetland buffer framework from Ecology's 2018 guidance, but Ecology still recognizes this as best available science since the 2022 guidance still references this as valid. So what you could do is you could have different types of wetland categories and then also break it down further by habitat score and impact of the proposed land use. So you would still use that same land use table as option 2, but this would offer the city additional flexibility to accommodate based on habitat scores and categories of wetlands. So if you have a low functioning wetland, the buffer would be less than what it is in option 2.
Let me ask you a quick question on the habitat score. You know, I've seen different studies over the years, and sometimes that's a little bit subjective depending on who's putting that report together. And if you look at just even on the habitat score on a 3, you know, we got an 8, 9, 6, 7. I mean, a 6, 7 could go below 6 depending on who's doing it. I've seen reports that refer to emergent wetlands, which never emerged. So do we need to incorporate habitat scores that I think are somewhat on the aggressive side by taking away a potentially significant amount of setback space? I mean, just look at the 6, 7 and below a 6. You go from 75 feet to 40 feet. That's a 35-foot variance. If you have a border that's a couple hundred feet, that's taking away a heck of a lot of land that I could put a garage or whatever in there. So how bound are we to that habitat score that, again, can change? Let's say if there's a mitigation that's required to go in to enhance that wetland, that it was below a 6, now all of a sudden you're going to bring it up to an 8 to 9 because you're planting certain things or whatever. I guess back to my original question, how bound are we to the habitat score?
I think in order to demonstrate compliance with best available science, this is the most flexible option that would be in direct recommendation from Department of Ecology. If you deviate, we would have to provide sufficient rationale that you would still be meeting no net loss, and it would potentially increase the risk that you would face during an appeal to the Growth Management Hearings Board. Several of the neighboring jurisdictions are currently going through Growth Management Hearings Board appeals around their critical areas ordinance.
So here's my last question. We don't have habitat scores as part of our existing code now.
They still are required as a part of the delineation. So when a qualified professional conducts a wetland delineation, they're required to determine what that habitat score is, which ultimately leads to determining what category it fits in. So while it's not explicitly referenced in the wetland buffer table, it's still a requirement to be prepared.
I get all this. I'm just looking at things that I have seen through my own experience change depending on who's actually on a site, even the company that they're with. I've seen just different variations that, you know, when best available science at times seems to be a little bit more subjective than rational, and that's just my experience. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Any other questions? I see, Commissioner, you have your hand up online.
Commissioner DeVoyne? Commissioner DeVoyne, yeah, go ahead.
I apologize, simple question, I can't read it. Can you put your define what a habitat score is?
Yes, so a habitat score is one of three categories that's determined during the 2014 wetland rating form. So as shown here, they range from mostly 5 to 9. And then the habitat score indicates what sort of habitat values are present.
Thank you.
Looks like we lost Alexandra. I'll see if she jumps on in a minute.
Okay.
Just for reference, a high habitat score means it's like a well-preserved wetland. That's a highly rated wetland.
Yeah, it's a little bit more than that. They'll look at the type of fauna, flora, actually what's growing there. I mean, like for instance, you could see a totally dry piece of dirt, but there's canary grass on it. So technically, the fact that there's canary grass on it, it's a classification of wetland. You see it all. I mean, you don't need to have physical water on it for it to be a wetland. But when we look at the different setback requirements, everything that we do in this city is going to be classified as a high land use, because all of our residential stuff, right here, high land use, of a high impact, residential more than 1 unit per acre. Of course we do that. We don't have a single thing in our code outside of that R1 up towards Bottomless Lake that would even look as a moderate. So if I'm looking at the setback requirements, and then let's say I have, something out there where we got, I don't know, red-winged blackbirds or whatever, and it comes back as a 6, 7, or an 8 or 9, you're looking at potentially a 300-foot setback. Okay, that's taken away a whole heck of a lot of space where a whole lot of mitigation can happen in order to have that land as something that's useful instead of saying, hey, it's untouchable by 300 feet. That's all my comment is. And there are a lot of other people who want to comment on that as well. It's not just me.
I have a question on 300 feet from what? I mean,
The edge of the wetland boundary.
so there's such thing as wetlands boundaries?
Mm-hmm.
And who establishes that?
A qualified professional. So there's a definition of a qualified professional in the critical areas ordinance, but it's typically somebody that is either a professional wetland scientist or has the appropriate education and experience background.
Okay. Is that someone a developer would hire before they apply for a permit, or how does that come about?
It's typically someone that you would hire if you have a wetland on site or if there's an adjacent wetland that might be impacted.
Okay, thank you.
And that's a definite yes. There's absolutely different, what do you call it, environmental firms that I've been working with for a while, and people I will never work with again. Just saying.
I'll
When
add
you
to
find
that,
when you
too.
find a really good firm that they educate you and you're on site and they're saying, okay, this is what we're looking at, this is why, this is what matters. You always, if you're in the development community, you always want to be there when you have a different biologist going out there, if you have different things for a whole lot of different reasons, not just the setbacks. But yeah, I have found over the years that depending on what report I'm reading and who's actually done it, you see a big disparity sometimes, especially on that habitat score classification. That's a big number. And like I said, it could be a very subtle little nuance that bumps you from a 6, 7 up to an 8. And look at your setback variances now to 300 feet on a high impact use, and everything in Sedro-Woolley is going to hit that high classification. So it's something that we absolutely need to be focused on and maybe have some latitude of where our latitude is in order for it to work in a small city. I mean, we're not a big city by any stretch of the imagination. So a 300-foot setback is a massive deal, and Category 3s are pretty common. I've always looked at a Category 4 as like a puddle in your yard, but Snohomish County would have a different interpretation of that versus mine, just saying. Yeah, this is a big deal.
To piggyback off of that too, the
Go ahead.
differences in interpretation.
Yeah.
So the city also has a third-party environmental review consultant
Okay.
on contract. So in the event we get a report that we disagree with, maybe we've done a site visit and
Okay.
we think this isn't showing us exactly what we've seen on site. So we can bring our third-party consultant into the mix and kind of do some checks and balances.
That's excellent, because actually, that's a very typical piece of language in a lot of real estate contracts. If two parties don't agree on something, especially on, let's say, rental rates, okay, it goes out to a third-party independent appraiser to say, well, this is really what it is, and they're not bound to either side. Thank you. That's a good feature to have.
I'm wondering if it might be helpful for the planning department to put together like a visual example of like how this all plays together, because I think it's kind of hard if you don't have experience looking at a wetland assessment and like checking out the habitat score, seeing how it all works together to figure out what your wetland categorization is, and then also what your buffer is currently now and the actual space and area. I think it might be helpful if we were able to kind of have a clear understanding of this process from start to finish.
Yeah, we can do that. So I think what you're asking for is a visual example of what the different buffer impacts would be for a specific example. And then you want to understand what it looks like when somebody delineates a wetland, like what the rating form looks like.
Yeah, just how it all comes together, so that you can, saying 300 feet, 75 feet, right? We can say, okay, well, this is doubling, but what does that actually look like in real life? How does that actually impact a piece of property?
Here's one thing to throw out into that as well, to include into it. Snohomish County is an example. Let's say if you come back as a Cat 3 with a high use, you have the ability to reduce the setback by putting in a different type of fencing. You get 75 feet back, and then you declare the remainder of that setback a native growth protection area. So if we're going to be looking at, we just don't want to have the one size fit all. There needs to be a little bit of latitude, because no wetland is like a perfect rectangle, right? I mean, you know, they meander, exactly, thank you. So having the ability to reduce that 300, and in Snohomish County, I think it goes from 225 down to 150, that's a lot of dirt that you get back, and it totally protects the water going into the wetland. It's NGPA. You can't have any invasive species. Blackberry, for one, which is the bane of everybody's existence on the development side, especially now that blackberries can't grow in that NGPA. It needs to be monitored every 2 years. Reports need to be filed. But there is latitude, at least, to be able to get that back and have some plan to protect the NGPA, okay, to be you know, a nice developer, as well as, you know, being, you know, supportive of the natural environment. But I know Snohomish County's not alone on that.
Yeah, and Snohomish County did get remanded to the Growth Management Hearings Board, and we'll have to review those again, but we can certainly put together what they currently have, if that would be helpful.
I think it is, yes.
Okay, sure.
Are there any outcomes from in going to the board yet for any of these?
So Snohomish County was directed to update their critical areas ordinance again, and Skagit County, we won't get a decision on until July 1st.
I don't
So another quick question. You said that the critical areas can't diminish. So does that mean we already have like a map showing where the critical and wetland areas are in Sedro-Woolley, and we're not allowed to lose any square footage or acreage?
So that's a really good point. So the National Wetland Inventory has an aerial image that essentially they put together where wetlands may exist. I believe Skagit County also has a map of where approximate wetlands are. But typically, in order to demonstrate that no net loss is being achieved and that you've considered best available science, you would look at what your current conditions are and then what best available science is suggesting. And then you would have to demonstrate in the record that your practice or your wetland framework that you're proposing would still constitute compliance with best available science and would achieve no net loss.
So we don't currently know if we're demonstrating a net loss.
No, because essentially you would have to do like adaptive management and see what your existing wetland buffers have been over like a historic time frame, and then see if you're meeting no net loss or if there is loss that's being achieved. I know that Fish and Wildlife is currently doing some of this analysis around riparian areas for jurisdictions to show whether or not no net loss is being achieved based on the high resolution change detection. And some jurisdictions do fund a critical area adaptive management program, but many jurisdictions don't have funding to do that.
So the Fish and Wildlife and the Department of Ecology are requiring us to increase buffers, even though they don't know if the current buffers are working.
Yeah, I think they do that analysis based on a statewide, but not a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis.
So I'm still confused on how you prove no net loss if you don't know
Yeah, most
what the number is to begin with.
Yeah, no, I completely understand your question. So I think what jurisdictions are faced with is that the agencies put together best available science that shows that increased protection values are needed to maintain or at least enhance what current protection standards are not achieving, but it is difficult on a jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis.
I forgot the stupid thing. It's just a standard checklist.
I think unfortunately all jurisdictions are in this similar situation with you.
This feels a lot like the housing situation that we ran into that felt impossible to solve.
Yeah, it's like build affordable housing, but don't build it on land where rain falls
Right.
in Washington.
Yeah, but balancing the GMA priorities have been exceptionally challenging this periodic update. And I think with the increased wetland protections and the riparian management zone guidance, it's been incredibly difficult for jurisdictions to navigate.
I'm wondering if, this might just be a conversation for another time, but in the grand scheme of things, if all of these jurisdictions are saying, hey, this doesn't work for us, at what point, who needs to be doing something to get everybody that is saying no thank you heard?
That It's a good question. So some jurisdictions are deviating from best available science, at least around the riparian management zone guidance, which we've talked about before, because Fish and Wildlife is advocating for site potential tree height, which substantially increases riparian buffer widths for jurisdictions, especially within cities. It's incredibly difficult to meet those requirements. Most jurisdictions have adopted some level of the ecology guidance around wetland protections because it is a little bit more difficult to deviate when the agency put together a model ordinance. You can deviate, as we've talked about, but I think we would have to have a substantial record for how we landed on deviating from the model ordinance to reduce the risk of appeal. But it's ultimately up to you all. We just wanted to present some of the options and add this additional flexibility for consideration, because I think this is more flexible than option 2 in terms of what you can do in the different categories, and then some flexibility for lower habitat scores. And then I also wanted to bring up that we wanted to add the small wetlands exemption. So for certain category 4 wetlands that are less than 4,000 square feet, you can fill those wetlands, and then they are exempt from, not mitigating those, but they're exempt from some of the additional permitting requirements, and same with wetlands that are less than 1,000 square feet. So that does offer you a little bit more flexibility in terms of what you can administer. And the city currently doesn't have any small wetlands exemptions, so this is intended to be for small, low-functioning wetlands.
I have a question about this one. So if there is, in here it notes, impact should be mitigated through the purchase of credit from a mitigation bank or in lieu fee program to fill the wetland.
Yeah, or you can do on-site mitigation. That's just the example language from Department of Ecology.
So, but you can do that to any size wetland, can't you? Is this an administrative process, or is this okay? So it's You're not going through the Department of Ecology and Army Corps and all that. Okay.
Yeah. Well, you still have to comply with the state requirements, but this would allow the city administratively to authorize this activity without going through a reasonable use exception or a variance or a similar process. This would be an outright permitted activity if that criteria has been met.
You know, I'm just looking at the existing stuff, but also what we actually have in the city that we should basically put our focus on. Category 1s and 2s, they're pretty untouchable. I mean, we have a couple of them. You got the Skagit River. I think maybe certain sections of Brickyard might be a Cat 2. Nobody's got a problem with those because they're the minimal amount of classifications that we deal with in the city. Most of our development stuff would be impacted by a 3 or a 4. So having a 300-foot setback, knowing that we're just going to be classified as high use anyway, just simply for the fact of our residential density, that's where I want our focus to be, because that's where the real impact's going to be as far as how we're going to get housing in the city. If I have to give up 300 feet from a 3, okay, and not have any other options whatsoever because of a habitat score that, you know, it sounds like we have an independent appraiser that or evaluator that would come on in. That's our bigger concerns right now, are 3s and 4s, not 1s and 2s. Unless somebody else knows something different than I do.
So if we went back to ecology and gave them the feedback that you all have given us today and talked about whether or not there could be some additional flexibilities for category 3
And 4.
wetlands, particularly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can certainly circulate that and see if we can get some buy-in or feedback around that topic.
Okay, what does everybody else think? Because this is a big deal. I deal with this stuff all the time. Wetland setbacks, depending on what it is, are a massive impact. And the things here that we deal with are 3s and 4s, not 1s and 2s.
I feel like the in general, more 3s and 4s. But then there is the other side of the riparian setback. So I think that on Brickyard, it should be a big focus. And I did have, in the types of land use table, the high, moderate, and low, do we have flexibility to make adjustments to the table?
So again, this comes from Ecology's model ordinance. Are there specific things that you wanted me to discuss with them, or?
Not specifically
Okay.
that I feel strongly about. I'm just kind of trying to think if we are stuck with a route like this, how much can we tailor it to better fit Sedro-Woolley?
So you're thinking like, mostly looking at the high land use intensities, and if there could be flexibility to make some of the high moderate?
Yeah, and in general, because the low and moderate sections are, like Jode said, it's pretty minimal. Like, I don't think having an extra buffer on like within a park area makes that big of a difference, right? Like park area, open space, you think about, it's just open space. But when you have to put structures and infrastructure and things like that, that obviously a increased buffer takes a big toll on the project. So, and then the residential, more than 1 unit per acre being in the high, that seems excessive.
Okay. Yeah, we can talk to them about that.
I wouldn't think we're the only jurisdiction at all dealing with this, just based on our requirements to, put X amount of housing in, probably limited amounts of land. I mean, that's like the mandate right now. I mean, 2 ADUs on every single-family residence is coming from the state, right? There seems to be like ecology's not talking to the legislature and vice versa. I'm looking at you smile right now because it's true,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
We've heard that feedback.
It's also misleading when all of this says recommendations, not mandatory.
Yeah, so I think that's why I tried to set the frame in the beginning, is that you are required to demonstrate no net loss and consider best available science, and then anytime that you depart from that, we have to have substantial evidence or inclusion in the record of why you're departing and how no net loss is being achieved. So it's a more difficult bar to pass if you don't utilize the best available science guidance documents that have been prepared by the state agencies.
do you have an example of somebody that's filed something like that? Sometimes the words sound more intimidating than the actual process. At the end of the day, have you worked with any other jurisdictions on the same problem or in the same challenge of how they worded their response over to ecology? Because again, every jurisdiction is different, right? I mean, there are very common things. I mean, I get that. But there's also things that are very specific to the actual city itself as to, just how they handled things and just even the composition of a city. Originally when I saw Mercer Island, that they were in front of the Growth Management Hearings Board because of certain housing elements on the low-income side. This is Mercer Island. I want to say probably 90% of the town is privately owned, right? So how does the city now get smacked on the hand on something that they really don't have any control over?
Yeah, that has to do with the changes in the Growth Management Act around the planning by income band and having adequate provisions through the comp plan. There's a lot of jurisdictions that are going through appeals right now with the critical areas and ordinance updates because like you've mentioned, it is very difficult to meet these additional requirements and include all of the best available science around critical area protections. I personally haven't worked with a jurisdiction that's deviated from the ecology wetland model ordinance. But I can check with our team and see what was included in the technical record around that. We have had several jurisdictions that have departed from the Fish and Wildlife guidance because we put together a record about how much land it would encumber, similar to the GIS analysis that we've provided to you all to constitute why a decision was made and how it's still increasing buffer widths and that no net loss is likely to be achieved. We could do something similar here. Just again, any deviation constitutes a level of risk.
What's our timeline on this? I mean, there's two final questions I have, and I hope they're the final questions. One, how long do we have to get this on our books? And two, is there something right now in front of the Growth Management Act, the Growth Management Hearings Board, that we should be paying attention to that will affect what our final composition is of this particular portion of our code? Like if somebody right now is being taken to the woodshed, so to speak, should we wait to see what that outcome is to see if we have any latitude or flexibility based upon a hearing that's already been decided upon as to what the outcome is regarding probably similar matters that we're going to have in front of them? Hopefully not, but this way we can point to something that's already happened that they've already ruled upon, showing that we are compliant based upon a recent decision by that body.
So we could wait for, so I'll answer your first question. So you're technically out of compliance. The city had 6 months from the date of the comprehensive plan adoption in order to update the critical areas ordinance, but the comp plan was actually due in December. So I don't think, I mean, you're technically out of compliance, but we're actively working on it.
But we
so-
didn't approve it until June 1st or thereabouts, right?
Right.
So I was at that meeting.
Yeah, but your original due date for the development regulations updates was June 30th. So they go by the date that your comp plan was due.
But there was a reason why we couldn't do it, because of litigation that was already pending. That's why it couldn't get done. So there wouldn't be any latitude there, but even though we couldn't do it because there
we can
was.
certainly ask Commerce. I mean, I think as long as you're actively working on it, I don't think it'll be an issue, but I can
We were actively
certainly-
working on it.
Yeah, that's been
Yeah.
my experience too. As long as we're actively
Yeah.
working on it,
Okay.
they're
Yep.
not coming up here to,
No.
penalize
They're
us in
not-
some way.
So it'd be safe to say we could use June as our 6-month start date.
Yeah, I don't think they would look at it that specifically, but we know that part.
Yeah. And then in terms of decisions that may be relevant, Skagit County does have some appeal language related to their proposed wetland regulation updates. So we could wait and see what the outcome is around that. One of their appeals included the small wetlands exemption, which is even considered in the model ordinance. So it'll be interesting to see what the Growth Management Hearings Board says around that. We can certainly wait if that is preferred. Like I said, I think the goal was just for us to be actively working on it to ensure that this update can be completed within the additional grant funds and that you maintain compliance.
Is there a way to pass the baton to DOE and fisheries and say, can you, if you show us that we have a net loss, then we will make a change?
I don't know about that. I mean, I think so. If you ask Fish and Wildlife, they will put together a high resolution change detection analysis But the 3 reports that I have seen have demonstrated net loss, which then the new Growth Management Hearings Board decision for Snohomish County states that comments from Fish and Wildlife are considered to be best available science under the applicable WAC criteria. So it gets a little bit more complicated around that framework.
You know, yeah, go ahead, go ahead. Snohomish County is a different animal because we're talking the county. If you look at
Right.
Snohomish County, you're going from Glacier Peak, literally the Cascade Crest, to the Puget Sound. So yeah, they have a whole lot of different critical areas, rightfully so. But how does that trickle down into the cities that need to be developed? I guess that's where the fine art actually comes into play. If I just think of Marysville and Quilceda Creek that goes right through it, there's salmon spawning in there all the time. I mean, so yeah, I totally get it. But Snohomish County as a whole, that would be a tough example to follow because they have such a massive amount of land that they need to deal with. You know, forest, U.S. forest property, state land, private land, everything. They got it all going on, so.
No, and you're completely right. But unfortunately, the Growth Management Act doesn't allow you to differentiate between urban growth areas and cities and rural areas. I think that's been something that our jurisdictions have particularly grappled with during this update.
Anyone from this side? Commissioner Huggins?
Yeah, I have a question and a concern I want to bring up. One is the question was, so if a wetland has been documented and set as a wetland or a critical area, whatever it is, and then a buffer is put in place and the wetland or critical area degrades, what happens? What does the state do? What does the city do? Who's telling who what to do? What is the remediation for that?
So do you mean like an unauthorized alteration, or do you mean like the habitat score changing over time due to natural degradation?
Well, it would be both, I think.
Okay. So wetlands are intended to be protected in their native state. So when you determine that a wetland is present on the property, the buffer and the wetland itself are intended to be like a no-touch zone. They're intended to just be managed for invasive species and then be retained. Unauthorized alterations would be considered a violation.
Okay.
And so it would go through the city's enforcement procedure. Wetland delineations are valid for a 5-year time frame. If for some reason habitat conditions naturally changed or there was different fluctuations that impacted the quality of the wetland, a new wetland delineation could be prepared to determine what the category is based on those conditions.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, that brings me to my concern, which is that professionals, planners, scientists, developers, all those people, they see the buffers and habitats as critical areas. Okay, it's a designation. We see what we want to see, but children, especially in dense neighborhoods, see it as a play area. All right, so the smaller we make, the more dense we build a neighborhood, and the more smaller we make the buffer area, the more quickly it's degraded, and the habitat, the critical area, is destroyed. So in order to get more houses in, we're setting up situations where we are going to make the habitat worse for the state, the city, the county, everybody, because I mean, who's going to really run around and make sure the kids aren't building a play fort or didn't decide to hack trails through the grass? I'm saying this out of experience because I grew up here, and they weren't critical areas when I was a kid. But all this stuff happens: fort building, people taking their grass out and dumping it because they don't want it in their yard, and they don't want to pay to haul it away, or garbage, or we're not taking any of these things into consideration. We're just looking at it as professionals, saying, yeah, it's a buffer for the wetland, and everything's cool. So I just wanted to bring that into the conversation, that there's the real world, what's happening around all of this theoretical stuff that we're doing, and we need to take all that into account. So anyway, that was my question and my comment, and thank you for clarifying the what happens part of it.
Yeah, but you know what actually happens? Okay, by posting those signs, those NGPA signs with the heron and everything on it, that's supposedly the out-of-bounds sign.
Oh, yeah.
Right, so, and a lot of times you have to do the split rail fence with the postings of it, so the kids can't play in there. That's the call of the Sedro-Woolley PD, that they're putting a structure in the NGPA, you know what I'm saying?
I'm just telling you, 67 years of traveling
I
and
totally
studying
hear you. Oh,
architecture and
totally. Yeah.
anthropology, kids will play, and they will find
Absolutely.
those places.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where they're drawn.
Well, they'll spray paint the NGPA sign with Chad or something on it.
So I didn't bring it up to get an argument, and I'm not sure that I'm against these. I kind of liked Joe's idea that we leave 1 and 2 with this, I think this is what he was saying, the stiffer buffers, and then 3 and 4, maybe we do have some flexibility in what happens with it. So it's not that I'm against it. I'm just saying, hey, let's be real about what we're saying here and what really happens out in the real world. So, yeah.
No, and I think this conversation is really important, because I think when we hear from planning commissions or city councils, we take that information back to the state agencies and express some of the concerns, issues, and try to find a way that works for everybody to the extent possible. So we can come back to you with their feedback and see if there's any latitude in category 3s in particular, and category 4s, and then some of this land use intensity around moderate and high. Because I think that would help meet some of your goals, and then we could also indicate that you're trying to balance the growth management, the other growth management act goals around housing and affordability. Does that seem like a reasonable next step? And then I can come back to you all next month with their feedback?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Okay. And then just really quick, while I have you all, I wanted to do a quick recap of the fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, because those are also going to be a complicated issue to navigate. So again, Fish and Wildlife put together these 2 documents. So volume 1 is intended to be a synthesis of science, and then volume 2 is their management recommendations for how to meet best available science. And so it constitutes a significant shift from the way that streams are currently managed. Their guidance document indicates that they want you to shift the term riparian or stream buffers to riparian management zones, and then regulate that area based on the site potential tree height of a 200-year-old tree stand that has the potential to grow in that area. And then also recommends that the RMZ itself be regulated as a fish and wildlife habitat conservation area rather than a buffer. We've had many jurisdictions have significant concern around some of that language. And then, again, for the delineation, the site potential tree height is the average maximum height of the tallest dominant 10 trees for a 200-year-old tree stand for a given site class, and a site class is a soil polygon that they delineate in their tool. And so we talked about what some of the streams are within city limits during the last meeting. And then this is just a visual of what site potential tree height looks like. So they have here a 200-year-old tree, and then if it fell, that's what benefits it would provide for site potential tree height. And their science points to that this would have full riparian functions. And that's a little bit too in the weeds. But so the Fish and Wildlife Habitat Conservation Area recommendations is that you currently have stream buffers based on the type of stream. This is based on the interim stream typing, and the stream typing has changed at the state level to now be type S, which would be regulated under your shoreline master program, type F, which would have fish habitat, and then your type N streams would be non-fish perennial, which means it has water all year round, and your non-fish seasonal, which just has seasonal water flow. And so the site potential tree height tool indicates that stream types would not be classified, that it would be based on the site potential tree height of that particular soil polygon. The guidance recommends a minimum buffer width of 100 feet, and then within Sedro-Woolley, those buffer ranges are between 100 and 245 feet.
Here's a question. As soon as I see the word management, that requires involving people. Who actually does all this? I mean, there's quite a bit of physical field work involved in mapping all this stuff. Is it the property manager that needs to put some kind of report together every couple of years, or is the city responsible for going out there and measuring things? I mean, who actually does this?
So Fish and Wildlife put together a site potential tree height mapping tool, which essentially has all of the soil polygons within the city limits, and then they assign what the site potential tree height would be for each predominant tree species. The complicated part with that is that there are sometimes assigned more than one site potential tree height value for a single soil polygon. So you would have to hire a forester in addition to a biologist to determine what the site potential tree height value would be, which is one of the, because I think we put together a pros and cons slide here. So with the riparian management zone guidance, it would be fully aligned with best available science, but it is a new concept that's not readily understood by most jurisdictions. It would significantly increase the number of non-conforming structures and uses, and then it would indicate that a third-party review process would likely need to be established, which would increase costs for landowners and developers.
So it would be a split between, well, that's my basic question. Who pays for it? Is it the city that has the overall responsibility for every lineal foot along a stream here, or is it the actual property owner, and who actually manages them? I mean, we don't have enforcement in the city that goes out to the different property owners and says, hey, where's your tree evaluation from?
Yeah, so the riparian management zone guidance, or however the city chooses to implement stream buffers, this would only apply to new or redevelopment activities. So if you have a structure that's already built, it would be considered existing legally non-conforming.
Okay, so it's only if development is going to happen within one of these or near these setbacks, it's only required at that particular time. It isn't for the existing stuff right now.
That's correct. And
Okay.
that's the same with the wetland guidance as well.
I'll touch a little bit on
Okay.
how that happens. So with a development, say you have a residential subdivision with Brickyard Creek running through it.
Right.
We've delineated the creek and its buffers, and we've established that in a protected critical area tract. That then is designated maintenance responsibility of the HOA.
Okay,
That's
and that's
pretty
now an RMZ, not a buffer.
Right. So there is a typical 5-year monitoring period. So the city will come out every year for 5 years to make sure, according to the mitigation plan or buffer protection
Right.
plan, essentially, that it still looks good based on what was initially installed in that area to protect it. And if we have findings that maybe they have not been keeping up with that, we basically issue them a correction notice, a letter, say, you need to fix that, replant some of these
Right.
dead things.
So-
There's a lot of blackberries, something like that.
And we
So-
already have it. I mean, we're already doing it.
Right.
So this shouldn't be any really big modification. Because when you look at management, I'm starting to think of all the dollars and who's going to be responsible for it. And we don't have a massive amount of staff in the city right now.
Right.
So all of a
Typically,
sudden,
after the 5-year monitoring period is up, it just kind of is left as is. Any issues that we do respond to after the fact are primarily complaint-based, or if staff happen to come across something during a site visit and notice a problem.
so Alex, is our procedures compliant with what the state's looking for? Like, does we have a 5-year period, a review period, and monitoring period? Or does the state have something like an in perpetuity kind of clause? So is our 5-year already in place guidelines fine to accommodate the new RMZ requirements?
So the new riparian management zone guidance are essentially shifting away from dimensional stream buffers. So this would be regulated based on those soil polygons, and then they do recommend updating your habitat management plan requirements as well. The specific 5-year monitoring timeframe is probably still adequate. But I think they're mostly looking for you to integrate site potential tree height instead of the way that the streams are currently being managed here. But our GIS analysis that we brought forward to you all last time is that it would significantly impact development within the city. So I think we showed you here so the blue or greenish colored area is what your current buffer widths are. The yellow area would be if you went forward with 150 feet for type F waters and 100 feet for non-fish seasonal streams. That's what Skagit County is currently proposing and is also being appealed for, but it would allow additional development to occur within the city. And then the red area would be site potential tree height, and those values vary between 100 and 245 feet. So you can see here what the distribution would be for the RMZ width based on stream miles within city limits.
And that changes, trees grow. I mean, a Doug fir will grow 150 feet to 175 feet in 50 years. So that's always a moving kind of target depending on what species is bordering the riparian waterway, so.
Yes, and then, but it's also Fish and Wildlife put together the tool which they calculated what they think the maximum site potential tree height value would be based on what tree species could grow there. And then if you want to do something different than that, then you have to have someone go out on site and do the site potential tree height calculator. Which is this distribution that I put forward earlier. It's a tool that they have available online.
So utilizing the site, I think we asked this question, utilizing the site, the tree height option, that is going to make any development around Brickyard Creek currently non-conforming, right?
That's
So like your house would be, and then your almost whole lots could be non-conforming, you could not rebuild on them.
Yes. And this is where I think jurisdictions have most deviated from best available science. And so that's why we wanted to put together a GIS analysis for you all on what that would look like. So I think we showed you this visual at the last meeting, but so the yellow area would be the 150 feet and 100 feet for N, and then your hatched area is what your current buffers are, and then the white line would be what site potential tree height would be.
You know, that gets to be a sticky situation sometimes for safety reasons. Trees can kill people, so depending on the tree and the condition of the tree and the proximity towards a bedroom, so to speak, you know, to say that you can't take that tree down because it's a danger to human safety, you know, that's.
Yep. Hazard trees, provided that they meet the criteria that's contained within the code, can still be removed, but they just need to be mitigated for.
Will the residents of Sedro-Woolley within this area get some sort of notice if this does go into place? Because I feel like the citizens of Sedro-Woolley kind of take care of their trees. Coming from a logging town, I don't think anyone's going to question it. They're going to go out and be like, I got to cut this tree down. It's going to fall on my house. And so, like, will they then get in trouble for that? Will they be fined? Like, I just think if this is a route we have to go, people need to be notified.
It's already a thing since 1972. It's called the NDS, sorry, I'm going to space it here now, but, you know, the thing that we get the determination of non-significance for, environmental
SEPA?
impact, yeah, SEPA, environmental impact statement, right? When that came out in 1972, my dad had to apply and do like 7 pages of paperwork to cut down a tree. And so he did the paperwork, waited a year, and then just went out in the middle of the night and cut the tree down. And that's what Sedro-Woolley's going to do, and it's always done.
So
just go cut the tree.
we do still require SEPA checklists for a lot of grading work that does happen in city limits. What is on the books right now in the code is you do need to come get a permit for tree removal within any protected critical area in Sedro-Woolley.
I'm just saying, I don't think that they're going to realize they're in a protected critical area. I think they're going to say, that's a tree that's going to fall on my house. I'm going to cut it down. I'm not going to go check with the city first.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide some background for.
Ashton's gonna be hiding behind the trees.
Yeah, Ashton's out there in the middle of the night.
We do sometimes, from time to time, we do get a call from folks that, you know, they're concerned about a dangerous tree falling on their house, and they'll go through the process. We've had a couple of those, yeah.
It's valid, yeah,
Yeah.
very much so.
My husband owns a tree service company, so sometimes he'll go out. He also loves trees. He will refuse to cut down a beautiful tree if it's not diseased. But he has a lot of people call him, and he's like, I think you should go talk to somebody first before you cut it down. And then the next day he drives by and they cut it down themselves.
I think I just wanted to reiterate that this is also a concern in addition to the wetland section, because these are the two biggest changes that are being required as a part of best available science during this periodic update. So I think this is just an example of the tool where there's multiple soil polygons for a single area. So for example, the Douglas fir could have a site potential tree height value of 206, but in that same area, you could also have red alder at 114 feet. So the tool itself is just somewhat difficult to convey what buffer would be required, and it's difficult to administer. And then Fish and Wildlife points to this VMAT curve, which, so on the horizontal axis, it's the distance from the channel. So 1 would constitute a full site potential tree height. And then on the vertical axis, it has cumulative effectiveness of several different functions that riparian areas benefit from. So it shows here that there is some sort of diminishing returns around 0.75 site potential tree height. So the average site potential tree height value within city limits is 223 feet. 75% of that value would be 167 feet. So 150-foot buffer with a 15-foot building setback would roughly meet that requirement. And that was why we went through that analysis of 100 feet, which is what Fish and Wildlife recommends for minimum protection standards for water quality, and then 150 feet would roughly meet the 75% of all site potential tree height values within city limits.
On the horizontal line, what is the 0 to 1 point, what is 1.0? It says distance from channel. What is
One-
1.0?
One would be a full site potential tree height, so a full 200-year-old tree.
But what if you have, so I guess that 1 is based on the highest tree in that stand?
So they're saying, so that's the methodology for site potential tree height is that you would achieve cumulative effectiveness for many of the functions that riparian areas need. And so they are saying that in order to achieve full effectiveness, you would need 1 site potential tree height value. But our counter argument was that most of the functions sort of taper off around 75% the full site potential tree height value. And so that's why we put forward that analysis that was distributed in the previous meeting.
Yeah, it depends on the tree species too. I mean, a maple's gonna be a heck of a lot wider than a Doug fir or cedar or anything, really.
Yes, that's true. There's variability in that as well. And so I think this was where we were going to pause for discussion. But I know that, I mean, I think that this is a very collaborative discussion, so I appreciate all the questions that have been asked so far, but can certainly take more.
You know, we put together a good group of questions that you need to forward, that you're going to get back to us. So I think we've
Yes.
been doing the discussion as we've been going through each particular topic, which is really when you wanted to really
Yes.
have the discussion on it when we're going through it, not after it. Because this stuff is pretty involved. A lot of the things are new. And now that since it's required by the state, and it's a pretty significant change from what we currently have on the books, as well as incorporating different requirements like, you know, habitat scores and things like that, that absolutely do impact the development capability of a property. So, yeah, you have a whole bunch of things, and it sounds like there's things in front of the Growth Management Hearings Board right now that we need to pay attention to as well that could easily impact what our final decisions are. So this was a really good discussion. And I knew as soon as I looked at it, it's going to be a big deal.
Absolutely. And I do really appreciate the discussion this evening, and I'll follow back up with you once we have a discussion with Ecology and we can report back on the findings of the Growth Management Hearings Board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
You too.
So what's your position on this? I mean, because we're dealing with it, there's a whole lot of changes. We got projects that are active right now that might be impacted based upon, you know, and we actually deal with basically the grandfathering aspect of things that we're going to be talking about in a little while, which, by the way, looking at what we need to still do, we need a full day for all this stuff. There's a lot here. I mean, I went through it, but I was like, we're not going to get this done tonight. At least I don't think so. Go ahead. It was directed to you.
Yeah, I had to parse my thoughts together. For me, it's just I love trying to get some flexibility in there. We just need to be careful about very carefully defining what that flexibility is, because we'll find ourselves in situations where it can be difficult to continuously treat developments who are asking essentially the same thing in mildly different scenarios. And maybe we said yes to this person, maybe we said no, but with some conditions maybe, sort of thing. It just gets pretty complicated when you start working flexibility in. It does sound like the state law is not allowing for too much flexibility, though.
Right, and that's the whole thing. We bring a whole bunch of different police into it, you know, that now has to micromanage individual communities that have very specific differences than other ones. I mean, Skagit County is very, very different than Snohomish County, than Whatcom County. I mean, I could think of just so many different, you know, specific, the land use, everything that goes from county to county. So this is going to be interesting. I just want to make sure that, well, I'm positive you're on top of it, but I can easily see the bit of handcuffs behind us because we really don't know at this particular time. And we've been basing decisions, major decisions in the city on the existing stuff that now needs as soon as I saw this is a pretty major change as far as, you know, buildable land and how we even calculate what's even out there.
Yeah, that's definitely the balance to try to strike is we've been tasked with providing more affordable housing while at the same time protecting critical areas to the max extent possible. So how do you do that? As far as administratively speaking, I like black and white code, yes or no. That is so much easier to administer. But if we're going to strike a balance, I think flexibility needs to be put in place.
We've got someone with their hand up. Matt has his hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Commissioner DeVoynes, you got the floor.
Thank you. I just had to point out in the document, in the material, I believe there's a typo on page 64. Or I'm not reading it right. Is this a good time to mention that or not?
Did you say page
But,
64?
Page
Is that
54.
54? 54?
page 64,
54.
under methodology.
Are you talking about the gap analysis document that was presented in the last meeting? I just want to make sure I'm pulling up the right thing.
The materials for this meeting, they were posted to the civic website, page 64. I can email it to Nicole if you like, but it says to evaluate the difference between the recommended RFDs and the distance CAO buffers, available data were processed in GIS to create layers which contain all streams and Sedro-Woolley buffers for RFDs. In each scenario, the process began with the aggregation of relevant data at detail is 0. The detail is 0. I think that the type of it is 0. Under methodology on page 64 of today's handout.
I think that was supposed to be a crosswalk to a table. So the methodology should be outlined in table 1 and 2. It's probably an internal reference break.
Yeah.
So we can fix that. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Anyone else?
I was just going to say, oh, now I'm on. It's always good to remember that when we're doing this job, a lot of times we are setting the minimum standard for everybody, right? So I'm with Michelle in that I like clear and cut rules for what it is because it's the minimum. I don't like the idea of setting a minimum bar for something, and then you have people coming in and constantly trying to lower that bar even lower when they should be trying to exceed the bar in any way they can. And I think there should be flexibility for people who are exceeding our minimum standard, but not for people who are trying to get away with something else that is below the minimum standard. Just my personal feeling, but that's how I look at the codes here and in any city, is that it's the minimum standard that the city will allow, not a negotiable middle or something. So anyway, thank you.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Anything? Well, if there's nothing else, we can close this segment at 7:48 of the regulations for critical areas and move on to new business, which is updates to Title 2, 13, 15, 16, and 17 Sedro-Woolley Municipal Code, repeal and replace consolidated planning procedures.
Thank you.
Ashton.
So some background for this update. This is a pretty extensive update that we're proposing for our planning procedures. In 2023, our Washington State Legislature passed a major reform of the Local Project Review Act, which is a major component of the GMA. It regulates what we do in the office, how we process permits, how we approve them, how we notify developers of certain stages in the process. And so that received a very large overhaul just 2 years ago. And on the other side of the coin, our planning procedures haven't been updated in about 15, almost 20 years now. So it's time to update those planning procedures to make sure we're following all of the requirements in the RCWs. And just to do some house cleaning as well, because it's a pretty lengthy and pretty old chapter that needs a lot of changes to it. So before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want to provide just kind of an overview on the big things that we're changing, because a lot of this stuff in here is references and a lot of it is just filler. But there are some big things that we need to highlight. So first is compliance with all the requirements in the state law. There's been some big changes with letters of complete applications, permit application deadlines, review deadlines for staff to process permits, and then the deadline for the permitted work to commence work complete, depending on what it is. Lots of changes to that and how we notify and inform our developers of where they are in the process. We also, some of the house cleaning that I was referencing was some old permits that are still in 290 that we no longer actually practice here at City Hall. One example of that is a home occupation permit. It says that if you have a home occupation, you need to come get a permit from the planning department. Nobody does that. We just issue business licenses for home occupations. We're just going to clean it up and leave home occupations as a permitted use and take out the permit part of things. Pretty similar to that is for accessory dwelling units. There's been a lot of changes from the GMA on what we can do with accessory dwelling units, and the intent of a separate ADU permit, which is what we required initially. All of those reasons are essentially gone now. Previously, we required only one ADU can be built on a lot, and there were very strict dimensional standards that we wanted to make sure our developers were aware of. Those standards are a lot more lenient now, and they are very clear in the code, and we feel comfortable at the staff level that we can catch those requirements without having to go through a whole extra $250 permit for somebody who just wants to build an ADU.
Hey, let me ask you a quick question on that. That was a monster change with ADUs at the state level. It totally overrode every single thing we've done here, everything, okay? We only had one, property needed to be owner occupied, everything just got shot out. Now you can do 2 units per single-family dwelling unit. Now, I've seen other jurisdictions, Everett in particular, because this is a big deal, they're allowing ADUs and they allow the condominium code now to split the ADU and set them out now as separate single tax parcels.
That's a state requirement for all cities. We
Right.
have to do that by
However, the
2027.
banks have a different determination because you have your loan on the property in general, unless that loan's totally, fully paid off. Before you start doing it, you're gonna go into that phase. You need to make it clean with Bank of America or whoever. So are we now throwing all of our code out the window that took us 6 months?
No. So what is being proposed here is when somebody goes to apply for an ADU, they come to the planning department,
Right,
and
yeah.
we say, hey, you need to get a separate ADU permit.
Right.
Doesn't authorize any construction, it's primarily a lot certification. We already do lot certification review for
I get that.
single-family homes. We find that that process now is just an extra cost to our applicants. And the primary reason that I was going to say was that previously we required a homeowner covenant to be recorded for that lot. And we wanted to make sure that covenant was recorded before we even considered a building permit.
Right.
Now it's illegal to require that covenant under state law, so that requirement's gone. There really is very little that we do in the ADU permit review that we don't do in the building permit review. It's almost like we're charging 2 permits for 1 project. So that all of the requirements, all the things that were under, what was it, 2083 ordinance, the ordinance that we worked on for 6 months for ADUs, all of those things are still in play. Nothing is changing for that. The only thing we're changing is that you only need 1 permit instead of 2.
Okay. But what about our density? I mean, we're still limited to 1, so we're able to keep that?
Under our current municipal code, we allow 2 ADUs per lot.
When did that change? We only had 1.
When did it changed last year?
Well, the state changed it, but I don't remember it coming in front of us to change. So did the state just supersede everything we did?
No, I believe it came through Planning Commission and it passed
I don't
City Council
remember.
of last fall or winter in 2025.
I must have missed that meeting. Okay, so now it's 2 per, and it doesn't need to be owner occupied?
Correct.
Okay.
We do still prohibit short-term rentals in ADUs. We are allowed to prohibit that under the RCWs, and that requirement has been on the books since we've allowed ADUs. So, before we delve into ADUs, let's focus back on
Hang on
the
a second.
290
No,
update.
but it is a big deal, and here's why, because Pat was talking about this, and we have, okay? We have to have X amount of population in the city, and I brought that up with Facet as well. Now, all of a sudden, we're saying you could take a single-family residence and turn it into 3, okay? So we had the debate back and forth, well, how are we going to accommodate growth in Sedro-Woolley? And our ADUs, I believe, go to 1,400 feet?
No, 1,000.
Okay, that's still a single-family house. So I always thought that that should go into the calculation on our buildable land, okay, where we didn't have to do a whole bunch of different things, which we did not have to do. But I'm just saying, ADUs are a big deal. And now that I'm on board, I didn't know we changed it to 2. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and so all those things that, to double-check lot coverage and to double-check our parking requirements and open space and all those things that we do on our plan review, we can accomplish that during a building permit review for an ADU. And so we're just trying to simplify that process for, mom and pop who want to throw an ADU in their backyard.
I don't want to be the stick in the mud, but just saying.
So that's one aspect of this change. Another component of this is in our municipal code, we had different language for what a short plat is. Some sections of our code said that a short plat was 9 lots or less. Some sections of our code says it was 4 lots or less. So we are going to clean that up, and we are proposing to make short plats 9 lots or less, as opposed to how we are currently been practicing it and currently been reviewing short plats as 4 lots or less. So that would be a pretty big change. It may take some more discussion, but I'd like to cover these highlights, and then we can talk about the nitty-gritty. Another part of this code update is changing the definition of a work-live unit. Currently, we do have a definition of a work-live unit, but all of those standards are stuffed into the definition. That's not very good practice. It's confusing for developers, confusing for staff who are reviewing those applications. So what we've done is revised that definition and added a chapter for the work-live units so that we have all those standards laid out in its own chapter. No changes to the uses and where we're allowing work-live units, just organization. Focusing back onto what was required under the state law, we have clarified what are vested provisions when you submit a permit applications, and in particular, what isn't vested. So these are things like impact fees. That's a big deal for developers. Developers want to know at what point do we assess those impact fees and send them the invoice. It also, we just wanted to clarify that ordinances that uphold, public safety or procedures on how we review permits are also not vested. So just some house cleaning in that arena as well. We have added a lot of tables to clarify when an application expires, when staff have their deadline to review, and when permitted work expires. And so I can find that here in a little bit, but that table is included in the third or the third attachment in this item. And all of that is in one table so that when you are going to apply for your permit, you see all of those deadlines in one place instead of having to go through different sections of code or from the master fee schedule to the code, which is how it is now. Just keep it all in one place for our developers. We also updated the permit list to reflect what permits we currently review and approve. There's just some minor touch-ups there, mostly things that we needed to add that were missing. We also updated what our submittal requirements are. Instead of requiring 10 paper copies of everything, we now just require 1 copy, and we reference what is on our most current applications on our city website for what our submittal requirements are. We've also done some touch-ups to our public notice and our appeal procedures. No significant changes there, except for adding things into tables and making things a little bit more legible in case we get to an appeal at some point for a development permit, or just for public notice when we're doing SEPA review, like you were talking about earlier, or notices of public hearings, anything like that. One last thing that I want to touch on is that we are proposing to repeal 290, and we're not going to replace necessarily 290 exactly. We're going to separate these code sections and introduce a new chapter called 1515 Consolidated Permit Procedures, or Permit Administration. We can talk about the name later. And that will be mostly for our permit tech, all of the things that our permit tech deals with on a daily basis in the code in one chapter, just for ease of use. And then the things like the public notice procedures, the appeals, the things that we do over on the planning side of things, we're going to relocate that to our administrative provisions in our zoning code, since those are the zoning code is primarily what we deal with. So, you want to do questions?
I don't think there's anything to add beyond the big points here, but I guess how would we like to go through it? It's quite a big update. Ashton and I worked on this, kind of split it up, so there might be a little bit of shifting on who talks, but we could go just through page by page. We could cover the big highlight things if there's anything that stood out to you and you'd like to go over those specifics.
Question, everything in red here is new. This is massive. Okay, there's no way. We would need a full day. I mean, I actually went through some of the details. I was looking on the live-work units. I just had a silly question. Why do we need 2 water meters in a live-work unit? I mean, these could be really small things. Why do you need 2 water meters? And it doesn't even address parking. We spent a whole bunch of time on parking.
That's not new. So the work-live standards, all of those were under the definitions.
Okay.
In 1704 administrative provisions. So we're just moving what was already in the code over to 120.
I just don't remember talking about water meters. Like, why would we need 2 water meters? Is there a reason that we, on a permit side or business license side?
I believe the intention is because both PUD and us at the city charge it as 2 units. So we charge 1 residential unit and 1 commercial unit.
Oh, so it's a different rate?
Yeah, different rates, different connection fees.
That's the answer. I just didn't understand why. If it was a different rate, okay, then.
So just to kind of clarify what's new and what isn't, there's one attachment that shows everything in 290, and there's comments on the right that shows where that's been relocated to.
Okay.
So that's one attachment. The other attachment, the one that is like horizontal writing, that is our draft amendment.
Okay.
A lot of what's in here is just what's been relocated. That is what's red and underlined. The bulk of what's new is in 1515, chapter 1515.
Okay.
And the end of 1704, 1704. There's significant changes. I wouldn't say it's new. There's just changes.
So that was another question I have, because I think pre-app meetings are amazing, first of all. I've done a bunch of them here in other jurisdictions. So the only thing I had was, and I actually read it, okay, it says, well, pretty much for everything, but for, let's say, a binding site plan and all these things, you have to kind of have it. I just have the suggestion that add another category in there called the feasibility evaluation. Even though it's kind of up in that first line saying, we'll bring anything in, feasibility evaluation's a little bit different, I'll tell you, because it's a little bit more detailed. It's like I can see a particular property, okay, and it's really important to have that pre-app meeting, okay, before I can do a binding site plan or really anything else. It isn't kind of a what-if kind of thing. I already know what I want to do. So having all the players at a pre-app meeting, which again is fantastic, really helps that process. So I wouldn't want to have people look at it and preclude it, even though it's not kind of required for a binding site plan, but let them know that, yeah, if you have a feasibility evaluation for something, you want to get in here as well. Because then you know who it is, what the project is, and you could maybe guide somebody, or it could be a DOA project simply for the fact that you don't have sanitation, water, you know, whatever it is. So feasibility is a really big deal as well before you even get to the other stuff. And that was pretty much it.
Ashton and Nicole, I just want to let you know that you've reformatted beautifully compared to the previous version. This is much more user-friendly, and I'm very excited.
That was the goal.
Yes.
And on that note, some cities, they'll have like a pre-application meeting, and then they'll also have a general information meeting, and they're two separate. So the level of information that you bring to the table for each one of them differs, right? And it can kind of, and depending on where you're at with the feasibility and the planning process, one's more suitable than the other. Just a thought in that range. I see that a lot, general info meeting before a pre-app meeting. But I would.
This is maybe an ignorant question of mine. Is it the jurisdictions that you've seen do the information meetings, do they have like counter one-on-one interaction?
I would say the city of Sedro-Woolley does an amazing job at communicating with an applicant, and just answering general questions. A lot of jurisdictions that I see have a general information meeting is a jurisdiction that you email a rather simple question just to get a little bit of direction to see where you're even trying to go. And they are not willing to take the time to dive into it with you. And so I think that Sedro-Woolley, even in your pre-app meetings, you could come a little bit less prepared and still get a lot of really good, useful information. I think that some of the jurisdictions that have the general information meeting, it's purely because maybe they're understaffed and they literally don't have time to answer an email or pick up the phone. So
I've seen that with the larger jurisdictions where they've just kind of tended to hide in their offices and behind emails and whatnot. So it might be appointment only, and that's a way you can get, charge people like, okay, I'm spending my time finding information for you. Let's put a cost on that for my time. That
Yeah,
sort
it's,
of
it's
thing.
asked the permit tech with no response.
Right, yeah. I think just the way we do business here is a little bit different. So, there's three of us planners on staff. One of us can come to the counter and talk general stuff on your proposal, or just getting some general zoning information, an idea for what you can do with your property, fill in the blanks. But once it starts getting into the more nitty-gritty stuff, at that point we'll offer, like, hey, you should probably come out in for a pre-app. At this point, it's getting a little bit more than we might be able to discuss over the counter without having a better set of conceptual plans to go off of.
yeah, I do agree. If you guys don't think that having a pre-app and a general information meeting option is feasible time-wise, or for whatever reason, you guys do an amazing job at just picking up the phone. So I don't think it's necessary, but it's just a tool that I've seen other jurisdictions use.
It's good to know.
So just kind of thinking out loud, next meeting, we'll have our facet folks back to answer some questions that we had. And then we could also bring this one back too. You had mentioned, you'd covered some highlights, but you said maybe there's some more highlights or higher level stuff you can go through on this too, so they don't feel like they have to go through this page by page, line by line tonight. We could break it into two parts.
This is huge. I
Yeah.
said that the second I walked with, Joe and I talked about this. You could spend a full day
Yeah.
on everything that's here. As soon as I started looking at it, like everything in red. And then I'm going through the details, right down, stuff like that. I mean, okay.
So maybe, I think the discussion is good here, but maybe we could, how do you want to do this? Maybe touch on some things you would like for them to look at between now and next month, and then we can dive into it maybe a little bit more than next month too.
So what I recommend is reading this. I know it's boring, but please read it. It's really, it explains really well what we have to do here at the city and why there are different thresholds for what we do and at what level we, have to, send out these notices and have these review deadlines. And that really, this is really our guiding document for this whole massive update. So once you read and kind of generally understand this update, you'll go through our massive draft amendments and you'll go, oh, this was just required by the RCW. Oh, this is just an RCW requirement. And so those things will start to be, you will be able to pick those things up a lot easier, I think. Some of the things that, aren't part of the RCWs that are coming down are a lot of the house cleaning that we're doing. So not requiring a home occupation permit, not requiring an ADU permit, increasing short plats to 9 lots. Those are kind of the big ones that I think you have a lot more discretion on than what the RCWs are saying, thou shalt do this, city of Sedro-Woolley.
Back to the permits, I did go through, like I said, there's a lot here. And it's just a curiosity, especially after last year and the floods we have. So if we look at our permit map, there's a section that you can do a floodplain development permit, and the other one is a floodplain variance. Let's say you put a floodplain development permit in and we approve it. All of a sudden, we have a major natural disaster like we had last year, and all of a sudden, that whole project gets wiped out. Who's on the hook? I mean, who's liable? Because we're the ones that issued the permit that said it was okay, even though that really kind of flies in the face of best available science, excuse me.
So we have strict floodplain development standards that, match up well with the FEMA requirements.
So what is it, elevated structures, things like that? Okay.
And it's different for residential versus accessory versus commercial. And we also, we are proposing that we will have the administrative authority to approve floodplain development permits, but as the code is written now, that is a hearing examiner decision.
Okay.
We are proposing to keep any variance from our development standards, keep that at the hearing examiner level.
Right.
But just reviewing what those standards are, because we already have code for floodplain development. That's already in our municipal code.
Do we have any developments that have gone through this process?
We've had minor developments at Riverfront Park that have gone through the shoreline substantial development process.
And there's not many structures down there. It's all recreational stuff anyway.
The hospital development, any changes at the hospital campus goes through this process as well.
Right, that's in a floodplain, by the way. Yeah, it is, yeah.
And then we currently have a proposal right now for a mobile home park that is some of the lots are partially within the flood zone. And so that is under review now.
They float.
Yeah, they
About the little lake between McGargle and Summer Meadow that dried up enough that they could work on it finally. Did that go into floodplain?
That's not in the floodplain according to the FEMA firm map.
Okay, thank you.
That was just a puddle that just kept getting bigger.
I was trying to figure out what they were going to call the lake when they were done with it, and then it dried up, and and now they've got the street almost.
I do have like some nothing like specific page by page, but I do have just some general thoughts. do you want to hear them or you want to wait now? Okay. Submittal waiver process. I've seen other jurisdictions have you kind of fill out like an application, right? Or like deferred submittal application, things like that. You fill it in. I don't know if that necessarily needs to be in the code, if that's just an administrative paperwork required with the application, but that's really helpful. And sometimes it gets completed like with the pre-app comments, or sometimes we'll go in and say, we're halfway through the project and say, okay, we can submit everything now. Can we do a deferred submittal for this? Or can we have a waiver for this because PSE is taking 5 years? So it's nice to have an actual physical document just to fill out and get signed, have that on file. Another thing I noticed, there's a lot of reference to the DOE stormwater manual. The year on that is the 2005, and we're in the 2024, I think. And then I think that's kind of most of like my general thoughts. There was some notes on, another one. With the short plat or any kind of like application right within there, so there's like the short plat and this is everything that's required to be submitted with it. It might be, I don't know if you guys prefer to have it this way for your own reference, but typically that is something that the applicant is going to go pull up that paper application online and or check the portal, right? And see their checklist of required items for submittal, not something that you're going to kind of dig in the code for necessarily. There's a lot of definitions in here, which is great. It's great to have a clean definition, but I don't know necessarily if the definition needs to include like submittal requirements. And then I think that would, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that would give you guys the liberty to like change the application itself, right? Like, oh, we've noticed that we've been needing this, so we're gonna update the application form instead of having to change the code requirements on it.
Yeah, I like that suggestion a lot. Just kind of why we formatted it this way is the Local Project Review Act says that we need to define what our submittal requirements are for each application in the municipal code. But you are right.
Gotcha.
Most people are not going to go, oh, I know where to go in the municipal code.
Yeah, it's a lot to dig through when you know what you're looking for.
Exactly. So what I was thinking was, keep all of those submittal definitions in the code, in the permit administration section, but then reference in the submittal requirements, just say all of the requirements that are on the checklist of the most current version of
Yeah.
the application form.
Yeah.
And then I think we would have that authority then at that point.
Right,
to
because
say,
that's
oh,
it would be a bummer to have someone reference your code and say, no, I don't need this, when for you guys to do an accurate review, you
Yeah.
do. And I think I had one more. So there is permit application approval timelines, or application expiration dates, sorry. And then there's permit expiration dates based off of issuance. Most jurisdictions have a timeline for when a permit is approved but not issued. Like, how long do you have to have an approved permit before you have to pick it up? So that would be good to reference in here. I know, like, the economy is not, the housing market is not booming. There is like a delay in building single-family residences, right? Plans are kind of shifting, and so it's like, oh, well, we have this permit approved, we haven't paid for it and picked it up. It's not technically issued. How long do I have to pay that?
Yes, and we did provide that. I did not mention that in my original spiel. It's in 15-15-020, the table under D. We are going to consider it as part of that application expiration timeframe, but we've loosened those expiration timeframes a lot. So it's mostly, the term is unresponsive for a certain amount of time. And so for an annexation, that's a year. But for something like a boundary line adjustment, it's 3 months. So it's on a scale of what the level of development is. And unresponsive, we did add a definition for that, but essentially there needs to be some sort of action that we can have in writing that is outside of, or. Let me find the definition, because I wrote it out.
Yeah. If there's no demonstrated effort of progression on the project, whether that be in writing, whether that be revisions, fill in the blank, it's a little bit discretionary, but you can't just reply in an email, we're still working on it, and we haven't
Yeah.
seen anything.
Yeah.
Demonstrated effort toward progression.
So the application expiration applies to an approved permit as well. Okay. Maybe if a note in there would be helpful.
And one last thing before we move on, before we expire a permit, we've also added provisions in here that we send out a warning, written warning,
Love that.
and that we have to wait 14 days before we expire.
Yeah, that's great.
For a response. For a typical building permit, it's 2 years. Yeah. Well, 6 months for the application, 2 years for permitted work.
I see a hand up here. Commissioner DeVoynes, you got a question?
I confess that I didn't get to reading all of the material for the second part. Can I finish reading tonight and email my comments to Nicole or Ashton?
Absolutely. Take your time and just send those comments over when you have the time.
Actually, that's a really good idea. I just wrote that down too, that what if between now and our next meeting, as you guys read through this, as we read, you've got questions, you're jotting things down, and send it to us.
That works. It was just a massive amount of stuff to look through.
That's
and
what I'm
everything
thinking.
you read
I'm
was something
Empathetic to.
400 plus pages.
We're also very open to a one-on-one sit-down with you. If
Oh,
you
yeah,
have
no,
any
no,
I did
no,
too.
always.
Yeah,
fine-tooth comb style, we can do that.
absolutely.
This was more like general stuff, it wasn't anything.
Yeah, I'd be interested to sit down one-on-one with somebody.
Okay.
Thanks, Matt.
When is our next meeting? Calendar. If we are going to take comments, we probably need to set a deadline for getting them.
Which is fine.
Our next meeting is July 21st. We got time. So yeah, if we could get comments from you by, say, July 13th, that's a Monday, then that gives us a couple days to work up staff report and then get a packet out for the meeting on the 21st. How's that? So July 13th, Monday. Deadline. Of course, we can take them anytime. And if you want a one-on-one, we can sit down with you too. Happy to do that.
Yes, me personally, I think I'd rather read it first and then make the decision whether or not to meet one-on-one, if that's okay.
Yep, sounds good.
But if there's more stuff you want to cover now, jump in. That's fine.
I forgot to pay 200. I was done. Sorry.
There's some references to original reproducible drawing shall be in black ink on stabilized drafting film like Mylars. I don't know if I've submitted a Mylar in a few years. I don't.
I saw that.
That might be I'm not sure if that's is that a requirement?
No.
Okay.
I saw Mylars. When was the last time I even used Mylar for anything?
I have some Mylars in my office, and they're probably from like,
1992?
the 90s, yeah. Okay, where did you see that?
Is it,
Page 275 of your, oh wait, I guess it's, yeah, page 275 of the packet, under the final plat plan definition. And page 295, under the short plat or binding site plan map final definition. And there's a few references, like when you're talking about the definition for different plans, like grading plan, says drawn by state of Washington licensed landscape architect, but I think you would want that to be a civil engineer. There's a few like little things, but I can put these in that like I have them all redlined. I can email it over to you,
That
so
would
you
be
guys don't
super
have
helpful.
to go
Thank
through
you.
this.
right, the different licenses that
Yeah,
they
like
stamp it
different
on
people have
for
to
whatever
stamp
you're
different
doing.
things, yeah.
Yeah.
Before we completely move on from this, one significant change that wasn't required by the RCW that we are proposing in the permit administration part of this is that previously we had 6 permit types, and we were proposing to reduce that to 5 because previous permit type 5 wasn't used anymore. It was a type of development permit that I believe got a recommendation from you all for approval at city council, and no development comes to the planning commission anymore. Planning commission deals with recommendations on the municipal code and development regulations. So we're just axing that Title V and shifting it, or a permit type 5 and shifting everything over. So effectively, we do have 5 permit types. It really is just 4 permit types and a weird process for street vacations because of RCWs. But those 4 types are, type 1 is administrative approval, we approve it without public notice. Type 2 is administrative approval, we approve it, but we send out public notices. Type 3 is the hearing examiner, and type 4 is the street vacation, it's hearing examiner and then city council. And now type 5, which is planning commission and then city council, is gonna be comp plan amendments, development regulation updates, everything that we do here, rezones.
Anyone else before we move on? So in summary,
No, this is a good way of handling it, because it's just such a massive amount of stuff, and I actually did read it. But I'm like, okay, this is the real details on things that are now gonna become law. So, we actually do read it. She's better than I am, though, by the way.
I didn't make it to the next section of the, it took me a while to get through it.
okay. Well, we can all finish reading this and supply comments if you have any by July 13th to Nicole or Tom, would either or, Nicole, okay? And, or call in for a one-on-one meeting, and we'll discuss it again on July 21st and go through it. Okay, thank you. This segment is of the meeting, which is new business, is over at 8:27. Next up, design standards and guidelines, final Western Washington University student memo.
Okay, so over spring quarter, we had a partnership with the Urban and Environmental Planning and Policy Department at Western, which is where we're both alumni from. And so we coordinated 2 different projects. I'll go over my project. Another RCW that came out recently, which I do have available here, and I can share with that. I just didn't attach it into the packet in time. But in 2025, the RCW came out that cities planning under the GMA, including us, we have to produce clear and objective design standards. We have the option of administrative approval for design requirements, but a lot of cities are required to have administrative approval for all those design requirements. We currently do administrative design review. We're not proposing any changes to that. But what we did have our WW group look at was a few different criteria for how we could improve our design standards, and I've included that in the memo here. First requirement we were looking at was if there were any excessive, overly restrictive, or cost-prohibitive design requirements that may be worth toning down or removing. We get a few complaints at our counter, especially from the Chamber of Commerce business owners, mostly downtown businesses that are on Metcalf and Woodward Streets, that our design standards, and particularly when they are required to comply with our design requirements, is very excessive and very cost burdensome. And so ultimately, we have a result where most of our downtown businesses just don't get a permit from us, even when it's required. And so we've been dealing with, I'd say, code enforcement. We have more code enforcement cases in our downtown than other locations around town, and I think this could be one way to combat that amount of code enforcement that we've been dealing with, and just to make it easier for local business owners to comply with our design standards. And I really like how Commissioner Huggins phrased it earlier, was that these are the minimums for the city. This is not a negotiable middle ground or our utopic view of what we want the city to look like. These are just our minimums for what we want our basic downtown to look like. And I think we need to use that frame of mind when we look at an upcoming revision later on this summer that is going to be based on this student memo that our Western students produced. And so there's 2 main points to what in the memo that our Western students provided. The first one was changing the threshold for when design review is required. So generally outside of the downtown, it's pretty simple. It's if you have to go through SEPA environmental review, or if you're doing a planned residential development subdivision, you have to go through design review. But in our downtown, it's anything. You're changing your paint color, you're changing your siding, you're changing your window sizes, you're changing an awning, you're taking off an awning, you're doing anything outside. You have to come to the city and get a $25 permit from us and comply with all of our requirements that we have in our design standards, which is 65% of your building needs to be storefront facade windows. You need to have brick as your primary component on the base floor of your building. All very long document specifying all these requirements, particularly in our downtown is our thickest chapter, I would say. And so taking a look at the threshold for when that's required, they provided a few recommendations. The first one, I'll just briefly cover them. The first one is allowing some exemptions for paint colors or minor alterations or minor repairs. The second option would be to set a certain square footage threshold. If a project is just 2,000 square foot, just throw a random number out there, then design review is required. And their third proposal was if the proposed development activity, the proposed remodel, if it hits a certain percentage of the appraised value of the building. Let's say the remodel is valued at 50% of what the assessor appraises the building at, then we'll look at the design review requirements. But if you're just throwing a slab of paint on the front of your building or changing out your front door because it's busted, we're not going to require a permit for that. And then the second component of their memo here, and the bulk of it, is going through our design standards and making sure that they're objective, clear, and affordable for local business owners. One thing that we did direct them was to avoid the urban village mixed-use overlay design standards. That was a very new part of our design review standards. It's a new zone, and we've heard from the past in the Planning Commission that because it's so new, we want to see it play out a little bit more before we start changing that code and changing what's going on over there. We need to give it some time to build out to what was written for that area. So the bulk of what they've provided is for our downtown. We've had those design standards for a while now. And that is by far what we get the most complaints on when it comes to design standards. So I provided the memo that they gave and the slides that they presented at their final presentation. We're not asking for action or anything right now. This is more of a heads up that design review standards are going to be what's coming down the pipeline later this year.
Okay, can I comment on that? So I did take a look at it. You know, I appreciate the fact that, you know, they're pursuing this as a career. So the reason why this city is the way it is because we have excellent design standards. And as soon as I saw in their memo that, I'm going to read it to you, and this is exactly where they lost me, okay? In their first page, research design standards in similarly sized jurisdictions with similar values and goals, example, City of Marysville? No. We have nothing in common with the City of Marysville. There are about 70,000 people. Their design standards are absolutely horrible. I work in Marysville. I sell properties in Marysville. I will tell you it is a free-for-all. If you get off I-5, okay, and you get stuck on State Avenue and you go down State Avenue, the first thing you want to do is get out of Marysville. They have nothing anywhere similar to what we have. What they should have looked at was Arlington, okay, not Lake Stevens, not Marysville. If anybody has a little bit more similarity than we do, you want to take a look at Arlington, because Marysville has been very, let's just say they've been all over the place now for a while. I've done eminent domains there. Like I said, I've done a lot of work in Marysville, and as soon as I saw they used Marysville as an example, I just said, hey,
So
listen.
I don't want to just focus on that because we gave them a long list. They didn't provide Marysville. That was from staff. We gave them a list of local cities.
Why would you be putting Marysville?
Well, we gave them multiple cities, and I'm
I
sorry
see
you don't like the
Marysville and
design
Lake-
standards
But
in
I see Marysville
but-
and Lake Stevens. They're totally nothing to do with us. How come you didn't give them Arlington or Linden even?
So the bulk of what they provided is based off of Lake Stevens, like you mentioned. The formatting that they provided is based off of Lake Stevens. It was their primary source that they mentioned in their presentation. But the standards themselves is mostly revisions to what is currently in our code. They're not adding anything new. They're not going from Marysville and picking those design elements and putting them into our code here. It was mostly a formatting thing and an ease of readability for developers
Okay.
to look at those neighboring jurisdictions.
Well, I was looking at other things, and I did read it. For instance, you know, make it easier in certain respects. You don't want to make it easier in certain respects because you get very commoditized product at the end of the day. That's what differentiates a lot of our new developments that we put in place. That's why you can look at some of the new BYK stuff. You walk through those neighborhoods, the houses are different, there's different articulations. You go into Lake Stevens or Marysville, it's like the same exact house, no articulation, tight setbacks. I say to myself, who would even want to live in these places? It's just the demand is driving it. But for them to learn different things, and it's what Pat said earlier, okay, you want the bar a little bit higher. Okay, like the city of Seattle, that would be another last place I would be using as an example, because Seattle is a planet in a galaxy far, far away, is all I'm saying. But they did a lot of work here, and I'm not disrespecting it, but what I'm saying too is there's a lot of things that we want that bar a little bit higher, and that's specifically as to why some people complain about things. They want the easier way out, but look at what we have in this place. And yeah, that's just part and parcel of why you want to live in Sedro-Woolley. That's all. Thank you.
I think staff have a hard time in some situations justifying, yeah, you need a permit because you need to paint your door, or.
That would be excessive. I'm not talking about that. I'm
And
just
I
talking
think that's
about-
kind of the intent of what we're trying to get at, because, I mean, if we were to strictly adhere to the code, we would be getting on everybody in the downtown saying, you didn't get a design review permit, and you changed this one little aspect of your
All I
front.
needed to see was Marysville, that we're similar in goals and size. I'm like, no. No disrespect to the fine people of Marysville.
I did a quick review of it, and I liked generally the ability to kind of modernize the downtown while still hanging on to some historical elements. I love the aesthetic of the downtown, but when you have a lot of buildings that are empty, it's obviously not working for the businesses that are trying to run and operate out of those buildings. My only comment was the reduction in the residential space on the first floor from 75 feet to 50 feet. I'd personally, like, if we're allowing people to go into these spaces and modernize them without these design permits, I think we should see if that does some revitalization before we allow them to convert more than 75% of those spaces into residential. I understand why we said that the 25% could be to give like access in the back way for a stairwell or a closet or a bathroom or whatever, but I'd like to see that standard of 75% on the first floor maintained.
Okay, I think that makes sense as well. That was also one of our most recent code changes, and I think everybody here was on the commission when that code change happened, so.
Commissioner DeVoynes, you got a question?
I just found a few typos and questions I had in the document. On page 349. Oh, shall be misspelled. And then a question I had, what is a pedestrian connection? That's what I couldn't understand. And then my other question was, on page 350, where pedestrian walkways by vehicular trailheads within a parking lot, the following are required. Walkways should be raised a minimum of 3 inches and marked with contrasting colored paving to differentiate from vehicle lane. I don't understand what that means. If there's a crosswalk, how are you gonna raise up the crosswalk? I guess I don't understand what you're referring to.
That's a good,
That's on page 350.
thank you.
Walkways should be raised a minimum of 3 inches and marked with contrasting color paving to differentiate from the vehicle lane.
Like raised crosswalks or something?
So this is not a crosswalk?
Thank you, Matt. So that is a requirement that's currently in our design standards. What the intent of that is essentially a raised crosswalk. It almost functions as I don't want to say a speed bump, but the intent is to slow down traffic as they approach a crosswalk and they go over this bump or this ridge that will slow down the vehicle. That's the intent. If that's something that Planning Commission is in favor of or not in favor of, that's something we can discuss, but that is, the reason it's in here is because that was from our current design standards.
I would not be in favor of that because if that's a crosswalk, I don't want to be walking over a speed bump. I would want a flat surface.
Yeah, that
If
makes
I
sense. I
understand.
should clarify that it's still a flat surface from the pedestrians' orientation. When you're crossing it, it's just a flat surface from the edge of the sidewalk to the other edge of the sidewalk. But if you're coming from the car, you travel up a bump onto where the crosswalk is, and then it's flat there, and then you go down again. So it is still flat for the pedestrian, just to clarify that.
Got it. Okay. All right. And thank you. And then one other spelling error, if I can find it. is minor. Page 349, following the misspelled 1L, the 1L instead of 2. Under intent, I remember 1 following 1L instead of 2. Minor, but I found it. Following a shall of misspelled. Page 349. I know minor. You want me to make some misspellings?
Where was the spelling error? I don't see it.
Page 349.
In there.
"5 feet in width shall be provided." The word shall.
Thank you.
And following. My version had 1L. Yours had 2. Okay, it's been corrected in your version.
Thank you.
Got it, thank you.
My battery's dead.
My battery's dead. My batteries are dying
My
too.
batteries are, yeah, I was gonna say, can I suggest that we maybe push the, whatever else we might have for next week, or do you wanna,
No, this was it.
this was it? Okay.
That was the end of it. As soon as we're done talking about the
Yeah,
woo-woo.
okay.
Are we, any more to talk about on the? That is it for mine. Okay,
That was it for my groups. We had a second group as well.
oh. Okay,
My group, you don't want to miss out on mine. Yeah, so like Ashton, I also had a 5-student group from the Western Washington Land Use Planning class. And their assignment was to take a look at our residential and mixed-use zoning code and to take a look, do an analysis of where we could identify opportunities for residential development incentives, specifically for affordable housing, and adding some flexibility in our development regulations for those sorts of things. And they actually put together quite a bit of recommendations. So some of the highlights from that work, with respect to permanent affordable housing, they recommended that we clarify in our definition. We do have a definition for permanent affordable housing in our code currently, but it does not clarify what the area median income bracket is that falls under. So to clarify that, for example, 60% AMI or below qualifies as permanent affordable housing in our definition. And in using that definition, including some inclusionary affordable housing provisions. So in our residential zones, an example being allowing an increase in the maximum density, which would scale up according to the zone. So the residential 5 zone allowing an increase density of, I gotta pull it up.
9, I think it said.
9, there's a lot in here.
And then,
Sorry.
and then it said R7 up to blank. I didn't know if that,
Yeah, and I think they were not quite sure what to put in there, and we're looking for a
and
little
then
bit of stuff.
R15 up to 22 or something like that.
Correct, yeah. So density bonuses for affordable housing if the development incorporates a specific number of units in that specified AMA percentage. They also proposed increasing the maximum lot coverage for affordable housing developments. So again, one where we would put some specific criteria, so what percentage of the units have to be affordable housing for them to get the lot coverage increase for the development as a whole. Another suggestion was to basically waive the residential recreation area requirement for affordable housing developments as well. So on the non-conforming structures bit, so legal non-conforming structures in our code currently, you are very much limited and restricted on what you can do with legal non-conforming single-family residences. So you can repair and maintain legal non-conforming single-family residences, but the moment that you ask to add to the footprint, what's the word? Alteration, thank you. What would I do without you? Do an alteration, anything that essentially increases the nonconformity of the use on the property. At that point, you need to go through the conditional use permitting process, through the hearing examiner for an approval of that. And that could mean, hey, I want to add a covered porch on my single family residence. And I'd say, sorry, you need to go through the CUP process. And so they looked at that through the lens of how can we, without just removing guardrails entirely, because there is a purpose for the legal non-conforming things. So when we have those situations, it's because the city at some point did a study and we found that we needed more of a certain type of land. So you'll see along Highway 20, there was a rezone done. Residential properties were rezoned to mixed commercial. At that time, we found that we needed a good chunk of commercial land to be able to serve the population growth we would be expecting over the next 20 years. So that, hence the rezone, and we created a good number of legal non-conforming. You'll see a lot of houses along Highway 20. They're actually zone mixed commercial. So any of those people would want to do an addition to their house, conditional use permit. We'd like to try to open up some flexibility with that to be able to allow minor increases in occupancy of those existing structures, allow retention of those older houses as well. And yeah, so as far as what they recommended is to define what an increase in nonconformity is, allow administrative review for alterations, additions, remodels, those sorts of things, instead of going through the hearing examiner for that. Specifically allow interior remodeling, modernization, and additional bedrooms, to allow a little bit of additional occupancy. They suggested to extend the abandonment period from 6 to 12 months, and what that means is once a legal non-conforming structure has been abandoned for 6 months or more in our current code, then it loses that non-conforming status. And at that point, essentially, it's just expected that that structure be demolished and it goes away. So it would be extending that period to 12 months. And another one they suggested was allowing ADUs to be built with non-conforming single-family residences. Other things.
That's a weird one.
It's an interesting one.
Can't add on to your house, but you can put another one in the backyard.
Yeah. Planned residential developments. One of the provisions they suggested changing is that we have a requirement that the setbacks to properties surrounding the PRDs, so any properties around the perimeter of the PRD, to not require the increased setback. It was something like it gave, yeah, there's a pretty significant buffer. It gave, like in special cases, depending on what the development is around it, you can have it reduced to 10 feet, I believe. They also recommended to explore the idea of a mixed commercial PRD. So that would allow for increased residential allowance on specific site sizes in commercial zones. Some other things, residential in commercial. So This one was to reduce the commercial ground floor minimum from 75 to 50% for eligible adaptive reuse projects. And we would include specific criteria for that, like a tie to affordable housing projects. They recommended we look into the MFTE property tax exemption, and the Affordable Housing Sales and Use Tax Deferral Program, which is an incentive program that defers 100% of construction costs, labor, and materials for 10 years, or for a 10-year deed restriction for affordable housing. And then some other things for specific to 30% AMI they recommended. Motel conversions, doing a rent subsidy pilot program, a landlord repair and affordability program, and then signing formal partnership agreements with local nonprofits. That's everything. They recommended a lot of things. So just like with Ashton's, this is just kind of a baseline. We have not yet done a full deep dive into these recommendations, so we'll be going through these with a pretty fine-tooth comb. But I welcome you to provide your comments on these and give some general direction as to what you like, what you don't like.
Okay, so we can email you comments and questions on this too?
That would
and-
be fine.
And by the 13th again, and then talk about it again on July 21st?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, I think I switched yours because I guess I saw the 75% usage on yours, not Ashton's. Sorry about that. And then the other comment that I had on yours was the increasing the tenant capacity or occupancy zoning on the R1 and R5. I feel like that we have so many historical neighborhoods, and we need to preserve the integrity of specifically kind of those historical regions. And I know we've talked about like having historical zones or protected neighborhoods before in the past. That's not something that we have now, but like my biggest fear would be if we incorporated something like that in an R1 or an R5, you know, Ferry Street, you know, they have these old homes on these huge lots, you know, with these new tenant guidelines or suggestions, you know, that could very easily be turned into like an apartment complex or a townhouse or some kind of, like the old homes in Capitol Hill, you know, like used to be a beautiful old Victorian home, and now it's like 6 different apartments, you know, and the yard is now just a concrete parking lot. So I would hate to see that happen to Talcott and Ferry and some of our other historical areas.
There's just things in our code that they just don't understand. They're looking at it more from an academic standpoint. There's a reason why we have 75% of commercial requirements in our mixed commercial, for a really good reason: tax revenue. We're not looking to make these zones into residential zones. So that's why these numbers are in there, and it's not like they were arbitrary. We get into a lot of debate as to, we really talk it out as to why we have different allocations for specific uses. And, you know, I get the overall, you know, idea, different things. Like in the comp plan, you know, obviously we have to handle that 0 through 30%. Quite frankly, I have no idea who's going to pay for it. Okay, these aren't things that developers come on in and put in that style of housing. That's where government has to come in. I mean, we have it in the code that you can do it, but somebody's going to need to pony up with the funds to make sure that stuff happens. So a lot of the stuff that we put in paper, a lot of times it just doesn't come about. I mean, it's required that it's there, but from a reality standpoint, it's very difficult to do unless somebody starts cutting checks for some fairly major projects. So anyway. But they did a good job. I'm not disparaging them, and I really, you know, appreciate the level that they went into. But there's certain things that we have in our code that are very specific to Sedro-Woolley, that work for Sedro-Woolley. They don't work for Lake Stevens, they don't work for Marysville, but they do work here. Thank you.
It was a good exercise for them, and
Yeah.
maybe we'll learn a few things.
Yeah, we certainly have a lot to go off of, recognizing that some of these things may not work for us,
Yeah.
but some of them may, with some tweaking, right? So Ashton and I are going to take a deep dive. I don't know that we'll be quite ready by the next meeting to, I think we should iron out the the critical areas stuff and maybe 290. Those are two
Focus
very
on the
big
more important, yeah.
conversations.
Yeah,
So
focus on the important stuff.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
we should point our focus there. So I won't say deadline for comments by July 3rd.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, if you just have some thoughts.
We'll
to
skip
send
the
my way.
deadline. Okay. All right, anything else before we ask for an adjournment?
I have just one last thing,
Go ahead.
sorry to keep
Yeah.
you, but speaking of historic preservation, it reminds me, when we were going through our codes and ordinances, we found a couple of commissions that are not staffed anymore that we kind of all forgot about, time's gone by. One of them is the Historic Preservation Commission. So the way it's set up now, the Planning Commission serves as the Historic Preservation Commission. But when we were looking at the ordinance that created all that, it's a bit outdated, and our attorney's combing through, we went through it too and added some ideas, and our attorney's looking at it now too. So at some point, we'll have a document. This goes to council, not planning commission, but I'd like to share it. When it's ready, I'd like to share it with you guys too, before the city council sees it, so you guys have a chance to see it before it's approved.
You know, I remember when that happened, it was that couple that came in here that wanted to preserve their house, and they did an awesome job on it. And then we got a notice that we were all part of the Historic Commission. I was like, oh, okay, now
Yeah.
we're part of the Historic Commission. But I thought we assigned somebody else to that at that time.
It's possible, but you know, again, it was just one of those things like, oh wow, we have one. Oh, didn't know that, and we better deal with it. So we're dealing with it now, and you guys are the Historic Preservation Commission until or unless the council wants to set up a separate one.
We
So, there you
we
go.
had one when I started. I think it went away when Mark Christ, he was really, really awesome. Mark Christ, the architect of Mount Vernon, and
Oh,
did
I
a
know
really,
that
really
name, yeah.
good job. And he had like 4 or 5 other people on that historical preservation committee. And also they did the downtown review of the buildings downtown.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys didn't have to, you had to make a final decision, but you didn't have to do all of it yourself.
Yeah.
But anyway, he got to the point where he couldn't do any work in Sedro-Woolley because he was on the preservation board, and so he pulled out of doing it, and then it kind of just went away about a year before we did the one with the placard for the old hospital site on.
He's
Ferry
still
Street.
around. He helped, there's a clinic out by the hospital that he helped design, and we worked on the building permit for us. I've not met him, but I know the name.
He also did our evidence building remodel that we just did last year.
Oh, across the street.
He was very upfront about it. I mean, he's absolutely awesome at it, and really enjoyed working with him at times because he would come before the planning commission. It was simply a thing, like I can't turn down a third of my work because I can't work in Sedro-Woolley, because I'm on the board that's going to review my work. So
Yeah. The other thing that came out of that review is there was a parking committee that was in there that nobody knew about. But as you know, we just went through the parking codes here recently, and that parking committee is redundant because, I mean, you guys would be the ones that be working on parking codes and updates. And if there's some need for a public parking facility or structure or whatever, I mean, that's something that would probably have you and the council work together on. So that committee went away. Again, it's funny when you find things in your code, just what is this?
I want to tell you something funny. So just the other day, you know how we have these really huge, long pickup trucks here? So it's it's right on the other side of the bullpen. It's right on Ferry and Metcalf. It's where the dog delivery, the pet food thing. Well, the guy just took his truck and just parked it on the sidewalk. He just pulled up 5 feet. It was perfect. Yeah, perfect, ingress, egress on the street, but he just parked it up on the sidewalk.
There's we've talked about that at our staff meetings too. That's
Did you see that?
parking on the sidewalk is illegal,
It is.
and it's our police department that's supposed to be enforcing that. And every time they write a ticket, they've got to go back to their office and do all the paperwork and see each one of those things. But it's a problem too. They were issuing warnings for a while there.
He took 3 feet.
Yeah.
They were issuing warnings.
Yeah.
I have experienced one.
All right.
I don't know. My car was in the shop. I had to drive my husband's truck, and I thought somebody's definitely going to hit it, and I'm going to be in so much trouble. And then I got a warning.
All right. Did it curb the behavior?
Yeah, I don't drive the truck anymore, so.
That's funny. Yeah. Anyway, there you go.
Oh, boy. Anything else?
Nope.
There was a nice letter one of the Nicoles sent on a developer that congratulated y'all for speedy service. Was it you or you? It was an email that we got. It was a developer that commented how wonderful it was working with the city. The guy from Whatcom County. Anyway, that was a great letter. Thank you for sharing that. And congratulations. Well, we're doing something right here. We impressed somebody from Whatcom County that came down here to build. So, way to go. Can we entertain an adjournment here?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Commissioner
I second
Fatisi?
that motion.
Commissioner Bowman, all in favor? Oh, wait, any comments, Joe?
That was
Okay.
Silas that told me. Any additional discussion?
Discussion, okay, no. All in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
We're done. Thank you. It's 9:03.
It was Silas that called.